All right. Hello. Good evening, and thanks for coming. So, let's get started. All right, let's start with this image, okay? It's an AI-generated image, but what I want to convey here is a bunch of plants growing on soil, exposed to the same sunlight, getting the same water. But what you notice is some plants are taller than the other, as if they're stretching to the sky, okay? Why are they doing it? And if you look at this little seedling here, it's not as tall as the others. So the plants that are getting taller, what are they doing? Why they're so being dramatic? The reason is because they're anticipating shade, okay? They're anticipating they're going to get shaded. They're going to starve for sunlight as the plant starts growing, okay? So the canopy is going to close on them. So because not to get starved for sunlight, they started preemptively starts growing longer, okay? Now, as you can imagine, it may not mean much for us, but for plants, they are sensing this small, subtle amount of sunlight that is getting bounced from the plants, okay? And we can't notice it, but the plants is able to tell, I'm getting this reflection of sunlight from another neighboring plant. Now, you can imagine, they don't have eyes, they don't have a brain, no nervous system, yet they can process the information, make decision to grow, okay? So tonight I'm going to tell you about organisms that has no brain, no eyes, how they successfully colonize this planet and what we can learn from them, okay? All right, so let's get started. So plants and animals, or we live in a different world, okay? So we can visualize the world through our eyes, and our eyes has special cells called cones and rods. Cones help us to see color. There is a blue cone cell, green cone cell, and a red cone cell, okay? So these are the cells we use to visualize the world around us, okay? Now, sadly, some people do not have some of those cone cells, and they experience color blindness, okay, because of genetic defects. But plants, they don't have cones and rods, but they still use a different sensory system to visualize their world, okay? They can't see the world, but they can visualize. And they're named UAR8, cryptochromes, phototropins, phytochromes. These are the names a biologist will like, right? It's sounds scientific and technical names, but they're fine-tuned to different light spectrum, okay? So UVR8 over here, it senses UV light. And plants are smart. They're sitting out there in the sun, they cannot move around. So when they sense increase or excess UV light, they start making their own sunscreen. Right? But I end up buying, my wife buys, I don't know, Hydro Boost, Neutrogena or something, and she insists I put on sunscreen when I go out in the sun, right? And there are cryptochromes and phototropins. They sense blue light, okay? These are the eyes that can sense blue light, and there are phytochromes that sense red light and infrared light or far red light that we cannot see, okay? So plants have a different sensory system that fine-tunes different spectrum to visualize the world around them. Now, I want to tell a little bit more about cryptochromes. This is what my lab studies, and cryptochromes is in you, me, and the plants. So who has experienced jet lag? Does anyone? Blame it on this protein, okay? So every time you experience jet lag, I feel jet lag really badly, and I say, damn you, cryptochrome, okay? So cryptochrome regulates our circadian clock. It tells you when to wake up, when to sleep. It keeps track of our circadian rhythms. So in plants, even plants experience jet lag, okay? It tells the plant when the spring is coming or when the fall has come, right? So what it's doing, it's a blue light sensor. So it's measuring daylight. So it knows yesterday was shorter than today, that's in the spring, right? It can measure day length or seasons, okay? It also regulates growth, flowering. If you do not have cryptochromes, the plants are super confused and they flower super late. It's also implicated in cancer. Okay, I'm not going to talk about cancer. And interestingly, the same protein is also involved in magnetoreception. So what is magnetoreception? This is the ability to sense Earth's magnetic field, okay? Birds, long distance migration, right? There are geese from Canada in winter, they migrate long distances. You might have heard about monarch butterflies. They travel almost 2,000 miles, these butterflies, to Mexico to spawn, right? To one location. It's amazing. How do they go back to the same place? Salmon, they come back where they were born, right? How do they know to come back, right? So this incredible photosensor does all this work, okay? And this is the actual data, not from a lab. It shows a cartoonish protein structure of cryptochromes. So cryptochrome, these are two cryptochrome molecules. When light absorbs, okay? Oh, sorry, when cryptochromes absorbs light, they form a dimer. Two molecules come together, and then those two dimers become a tetramer, means there are four molecules get attached. This is like an on-off switch, and sometimes we joke it looks like a donut, okay? It's like a protein donut. So now plants also get stressed, like us, right? They also get stressed, especially in light, okay? So the plants have to walk a fine line. They need light to survive, but at the same time, excess light and UV light is also damaging. They also get sunburned like us. So you can see when there is high light and UV, they get spots, they get sunburn, they turn chlorotic, right? Some of the chlorophyll starts breaking down, and there's a lot of cell death. You see the spots. Now, my lab has discovered the same cryptochromes are also required to protect the plants against UVC. If you don't have cryptochromes, the plants are literally dead under UV. So we discovered that you need this incredible photoreceptor also to protect the plant from sun damage. Now, to mitigate sun damage, especially cryptochromes, helps make pigments, okay? The cells or the plant cells can make its own sunscreen that's going to absorb harmful UV radiation. And UV radiation is really bad, even for us, because it can cause skin cancer. It's one of the biggest reasons of or cause of skin cancer, and because it damages DNA and proteins and the machinery that is required for photosynthesis, the chloroplast, okay? You can't have too much of excess light because it's going to get damaged. So plant has to mitigate all this, and cryptochromes, or the blue light sensor, plays a major role in sensing the light intensity that's coming from the sun and making the plant adapt accordingly. All right, and remember, too much is too bad. You can't keep turning on the sunscreen all the time or defense mechanisms against stress. Then you're not going to grow because you're diverting all the resources, right? All right, so the next I want to talk about is shade avoidance, okay? And I want to use this paradigm to tell you that plants anticipate the future and plan accordingly, because plants cannot run away from a problem like we can, right? So we can easily run away from a problem, but plants can do that. And this is what I started with my first slide with. This is not an AI. This is actual tomato plants. They're grown in different densities, okay? So what do you notice? When you start growing them in higher and higher densities, you start seeing the plants are getting taller and taller, okay? And again, this is the shade avoidance response, which I mentioned earlier. Now plants, before they're actually shaded, they're anticipating the future. They're like, I better stretch and grow taller, otherwise I'm lost. I'm lost to the competition, I can't survive, okay? So this is one of the big problems that faces agriculture. I'll come to that in the next slide. So what do you notice as you start growing plants in high density? They're sensing, so higher density, they're sensing more and more far-red light that's getting reflected. from the neighboring vegetation. The cell walls of the plants are reflecting far-red light, and the plants are incredibly sensitive to this. So they can sense more far-red light I'm getting. That means there are more plants around me. That means more competition, so I need to grow taller. So by growing taller, as I said, they cannot run and move. The only way they can survive in a competition is by growing taller, means you get more access to the sunlight than your neighbor. So now, by growing taller, they also start adjusting the leaf angles, and in higher density, you can also see it's much paler because the leaf starts getting thinner so that it can absorb. We actually call it a shade leaf here because making it thinner, it can absorb. It's more efficient in harnessing sunlight. Now, shade avoidance is one of the biggest problems we face, okay? So most of the crop plants that we rely on for our food supply, they're shade intolerant. They cannot tolerate shade. There are a lot of plants. If you're gardening, who knows about hostas? Ferns, they love shade. So wherever you got a shady spot in a garden, plant hostas or ferns, they thrive, okay, because they're shade tolerant. But all the vegetables, the crops, the wheat, right? So they do not like shaded, and they're extremely competitive. As you can see, this is wheat grown in high density. They're avoiding shade, and since they're growing taller, they're more prone to lodging. A little bit of wind or rain, they're flat on the ground, and the crop is gone. And a nice visual representation of the radish. A shade-avoiding radish, you're going to get a smaller radish, right? And this is one of the biggest problems we are facing. How can we maximize food or crop production, okay? Because the amount of arable land is decreasing. The population is increasing also. The climate is changing, right? So how do we maximize food production in a given area? One option is to cram more plants in a given area, but then you have to deal with shade avoidance response, okay? Because plants need its space. It doesn't like, so they like social distancing before it got popular during the pandemic. They always practice social distancing, right? They don't like to be next to each other. They don't like to be touched, actually, okay? Now, one of the biggest problems of shade avoidance is just not in the shoot, okay? That they're reaching out to the sun. It's also the root system. It impacts the root system. As you can tell, this is our lab rat, Arabidopsis. We don't eat, don't try. It's bitter. But tomatoes, you can see, it's important. I'm sure everyone uses tomatoes in their cooking. It doesn't have a lot of roots. The reason is it needs to avoid shade. It needs to grow taller. And the plant is like, I'm going to put all my energy in the stem and the shoot to grow taller. I'm going to move my resources, okay, from the roots so that I have more resources for the shoot. Now, the problem with that is we know that a poor root system cannot support the plant. Your overall crop productivity is bad because you need a healthier root system as well. So you can imagine shade avoidance, first of all, you decrease your yield because you're putting all your energy to grow faster. Plant is not caring about to feed us. They're caring about its own survival, right? The survival of the fittest. Now, if you're a farmer, you're worried about crop productivity because the roots are also an issue. So part of my lab is also working on trying to understand why the roots don't grow. And we identified some genes like WRKY26 and 45. If we turn them on all the time, we can get shorter roots compared to the control parental lines. Okay, we identified in Arabidopsis. Now we got a molecular hook that we can use and make the crops better, right? They can try to avoid shade, but we can also make these roots go longer. Now, what plants can teach us, all right? So what plants can teach us? So plants are rooted in place, okay? So as I said earlier, they cannot avoid problems. They cannot run away from problems. They're stuck in one place, and what we can learn that they're masters in detecting early signals, right? So they're masters in adapting. They're masters in detecting subtle light changes before shading occurs. They're masters in detecting heat before there's damage. They're masters in detecting changes in nutrient and water availability. Okay? So what does it tell you? What can we learn from plants? It's not being fast. It's about detecting early, make early decisions, and make wise decisions, right? And to survive. And this is what the plants can teach us. More than that, understanding how plants sense their environment, the temperature, light, can help us future-proof plants. Plants that can survive flooding because of changes in climate, or drought, right? That can better tolerate heat or drought so that it can be productive. So this has incredible capacity for us to understand how we can improve our food security, especially when the climate is changing. Now, I want to finish my talk with this slide, okay? So diamonds are very common in the universe. Universe is full of carbon, okay? And the universe, if you look at the known universe we know, it's really good in making rocks and gases. But what we know is only our planet has these fascinating plants that can take sunlight, that takes 93 million miles away, right? Sunlight coming from 93 million miles away, takes this light, makes food, right? Builds structures and supports all kind of ecosystem. It's part of every food chain, right? So plants also, they're passive. They're not passive. They're sitting and calculating. They're sensing their environment and really making fast decisions and change their growth and alter their developmental strategies, right? And they're masters in colonizations because of this. So you can imagine a life without plants. We cannot imagine. We'll be okay without plants or not. No. Right? You're right. We cannot survive without plants, but plants will be totally fine without us, okay? They don't care. They'll be totally fine. They're totally fine. So, going back to diamonds. In our own solar system, it might be rare on our planet to mine diamonds if you're not looking for lab-grown diamonds. But Neptune and Uranus, there are diamond rains, right? Because of the immense pressure and gases of methane. Methane splits into carbon, and you get diamond rains, like almost tons, thousands of tons of diamonds just rain on Neptune, okay? And there is this star, Lucy, that's just 48 light years away. It's 2/3 the size of Earth, okay? Its core is one large diamond. And if someone is looking for a large diamond, if you can afford, you know where to go, all right? So to end, I just want to tell you that, so the breath we take, or the beer, it's gone through a plant leaf, right? It's converting the light into energy to make the food for us, the oxygen we breathe, okay? So with this, I would like to thank many, many people, the communication department, Lisa, Caroline, and team, current and past lab members, and if you've not been to Cold Spring Harbor, please come. My lab is in this wonderful building called Delbrook. It's a historical building that's right on the water, the ocean, and I'd like to thank the funding agencies. It's our taxpayers' money, okay? So I thank all of you and the lab, okay? Thank you.